Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, just came home from work and I spent a ridiculous amount of money on feeding the birds outside. And it was not tuppence a bag, in case you're wondering. Be feeding the birds and the squirrels, and I like watching them. My cat likes watching them too, so it's not a big deal to spend some money. We got a woodchuck in the back too, which my girlfriend does not like. I think he's kind of cute. Runs away from me and then hides under the shed. I don't really feed him anything, except maybe probably eats out of the compost pile. And we had a skunk that used to come to the front door and meet me like 3 o'clock in the morning when I was going to work, and which does not freak me out. You don't bug them, they don't bug you. They're kind of cute. I haven't seen them around in a while, which is too bad. But anyhow, this video is not about me loving the wildlife around my house. The other thing, it's going to be really cool. I'm really pumped tonight that I'm going to be playing in a Hollow Earth Expedition one-shot. Runeslinger is going to run that for myself and for Jason, Dark Age of Roleplay Games, so that should be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, the topic I'm going to talk about today is not a lot of fun, and this is something called character poisoning. This is not a term that I knew, but I knew, as soon as I heard Runeslinger talk about this term, I was like, oh yes, I know what that is. I'm not sure if he made that term up or not. I really don't care. I'll have to go look up, but I really didn't look hard enough on the internet to see whether somebody else had coined that phrase earlier. So I'm going to kind of break my rules a little bit. I'm going to put this into my pet peeves playlist, although I don't think I'm going to put a positive spin on this one. I feel bad, but I don't think I can. So I'm going to get on with it and kind of give you my history with this concept or seeing this phenomenon, and just talk a little bit more about like what it is, so kind of define it as I'm doing it. And so, I'll start off at the beginning. And I started playing role-playing games in 1981 with basic BXD&D, which of course you know that because you watch my channel all the time because I'm fascinating, right? Okay. And I didn't see a heck of a lot of this phenomenon back then. And really what character poisoning is, in a nutshell, is you come to the game table with this preloaded character concept. And I'm not talking about a backstory as such. I'm talking about like, this is how cool my character is. And this is what my character can do. And this is what my character has done. And this is who my character is if they're really important. All this kind of preloaded stuff. And generally what happens is you're not able to back this up mechanically within the parameters of the game. Or you're stating all these things that your character has done that people should know about. And so I'm a really important assassin. I've assassinated the King of Prussia and caused this war and did all this stuff. But it's not something that you actually did in game. And you expect other people to know who you are. That's another, a nuance or, facet of the character poisoning phenomenon. It's never fun. So anyhow, back in 1981, I didn't see a heck of a lot of this at first in the 80s. Just so long ago. It doesn't seem that long ago. But anyhow. And I'll tell you, my own story was I really didn't come preloaded to playing Dungeons and Dragons. That was the first role-playing game I heard of. I heard about it for a few years, and then I got it in 1981. And I was a big fan of fantasy and science fiction. There were characters I loved. There were some movies I'd watched. All the movies back then weren't all that great, which I'm going to get to. And so I had some ideas of the genre, but I really had no clue what this game was going to be about, except you could play a wizard or a dwarf or an elf or a warrior or something, and there might be orcs and all that kind of good junk. So I read it. I read the game, and by reading the game, I found out what the characters were going to be like. And that set the tone for what my expectations were about this game. So I didn't, enter that game with any form of character poisoning, as far as I can tell, because the game itself told me what the characters were going to be like. It even informed me, through very reasonable deduction, what was my character going to be like compared to the normal guy. As I bought other D&D products that were available back then, and played a lot more AD&D, which let people call first edition nowadays. Those books continue to inform me what those characters were going to be like. So I didn't come to the table with this preconceived notion of how cool my druid or wizard was going to be as I started this character, because I knew what the progression was going to be like, and that I was going to have to earn my stripes, so to speak. I did see a little bit of this back in the day, and I think it was from players that just hadn't read the book, and they came with some more preloaded ideas from fiction or whatever, and they were expecting to play characters that were much more powerful than what the mechanics would suggest. And generally what would happen is we'd kind of point them and say, hey, read this, and a lot of times they'd read it and say, oh, okay, I get it now. And sometimes we would not so gently inform them why they were mistaken, because we were kids. But generally what would happen was they'd either get it and say, oh, okay, now I understand, or they would decide that the game wasn't for them, this sucked. Okay, that's fine too. So that's really kind of the character poisoning I saw, at that particular time. Was more just based on the expectations from fiction. And I didn't play, once again, you should know this, because I'm fascinating, the hubris. That like I stopped playing from about like 1990 to like about 2010 or so, something like that. And I played a little bit more after 1990, but I had kids in 1990, so it became a lot less. So I had this big chunk of time where I was not playing role-playing games. I came back and I found a lot more of this character poisoning sort of stuff happening. And sometimes it was just this big elaborate backstory. And I made videos about backstories. And I kind of like, it's funny, I watched a few of them lately just to see where I've changed my tune. And I don't want to say I've changed my tune or had this big paradigm shift, but I've kind of expanded or broadened my perspective. So I'm more okay with backstories to figure like, why do these two characters like each other? Why are they together? Like I know tonight, why Halsey and Chuck are going to be adventuring together. I know how they knew each other and from school. It wasn't a big elaborate backstory, but it gave us an idea. I know who they are, and why they're doing this one thing they're doing at the time before all hell breaks loose. Anyhow, so. But I've seen people come in with these backstories, and as Anthony mentioned in the video he did on character poisoning, which hopefully I will link to this, and in his blog post, both of which I think are like 3 or 4 years old, somewhere around there, a while ago. He mentions that like in these backstories, the content is really often the issue. It's not writing down so much like who your character is. That's important. Like when I made my concept for like even something like Philippe in All for One. The idea was like I didn't write this big giant backstory of how he was his village was sacked by Bavarian spies and he left childless and or parentless rather, and he was among the orphans that had to work in the slave camps. I was like, no, he's as young as seven sons. He has something to prove. He's good with a sword. He's a bit unsure of himself and a bit overconfident and cocky and a thrill seeker. That's it. I can figure out who this guy is. But I've seen people come in with these big, giant, elaborate backstories, and in the Lamentations of the Flame Princess game I was involved in for a long time, I saw like a beautiful example of this, and it was not beautiful. And we had a lot of we had a core group of like 4 or 5 guys that lasted the longest, and we had a lot of other players, not a lot, but probably like another 5 people kind of like drifted in and out, and generally did not work out. And this one was one of the most entertaining ones. Nice person. But they show up and they decide that they want to be somebody really important. So they get together with a game master before the game as they're kind of like asking to join the game. And there was a character, an NPC in our game called the Invincible Overlord. And that was just a great tip of the hat to the old D&D kind of icon. But he was a big nemesis, big bad guy, which we finally dispatched at one point. But she came and she wanted to be somebody important, so she said, can I be the granddaughter of the Invincible Overlord? And for whatever reason, the game master decided that, okay, we'll figure something out. And so it turned out that she did something really duplicitous and what have you. I didn't really care so much about the duplicitous thing. I thought that was kind of entertaining. It was the idea that like she was somebody really important. We should know who she is now. And she had all these connections that she did not earn. And that's a big part of it. To me, I feel like you ought to earn your stripes. And there's a lot of ways that shows up for me. I drink some of this delicious diet Sherry 7-Up. Excuse me. Anyhow, one of the ways that kind of shows up, and I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but you like this kind of stuff because you watch my videos, just to go along for the ride. I never really got into writing a big backstory in terms of what my character had done. And one of the reasons for that is because it always just felt a little bit wrong, like I had not earned it. I've talked in videos a lot about the fact that I like playing in this kind of like, mid-tier. If I'm playing like a class level based game like D&D, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, somewhere like levels 3 to 7, something like that, that's awesome. But I always feel a little uncomfortable starting a character there, whether it's somebody else's character, but especially my character, because I feel like I did not earn those levels. I did not earn that expertise. That person had life experiences that I, as a player, was not there for. I was completely divorced from that, and that just always feels kind of wrong. Now, I can get over that and play one of those characters. I'll be okay. But when I'm playing whatever kind of game, I don't feel comfortable. It just feels plain old wrong to make up a story about what this person had done in the past. Because I wasn't present for it. We're kind of like this starting off point. And we'll see, like, what the character is capable of, what they can do. So that's a part of that whole character poisoning that I ran into, and continue to run into every once in a while, is the kind of like, do you know who I am? And there's a bunch of deeds that I've done which I should be renowned for, which can be no fun because what about the other players? What makes this one so important? And I don't necessarily think that people always mean to do that in a malicious way, but it can come out where it's just not really meshing really well, and it can kind of poison the well of fun. The other thing that I've seen though over and over again is that players will come into a game and they will have this preconceived notion of like how powerful their character should be, and sometimes it's just because plain old they have not read the book, they have not figured out how this game's mechanics have worked, or they're used to other games and they are used to playing characters that are more heroic in a different game, and so they get they're expecting, or their expectations are that they really would like their character, this concept they have to mesh with what they're used to in a different game. And once again, for me, I like to kind of read the book. But there are mechanics in games, I think, that may sort of enforce this, and I'll get to that. I want to kind of, leave that hanging and also talk a little bit more about cinema. I have this kind of like pet hypothesis. I have no idea whether this is true or not true, but it's just sort of something like floating around in my head, and that is that perhaps as special effects in cinema, TV have become better and better. I don't care whether or not you like computer graphics or not. That's not the point. The point is that special effects have become undeniably better and cooler. You watch an action movie, you watch a fantasy movie, you watch the Avengers, any kind of supers movie. It's just amazing, and you can it brings the stuff right to life. And it's no matter how big of an imagination you have, you can see what a heroic person in any sort of genre is like, and this big inflated version of that. And I'm wondering if, because cinema and TV have gotten so much better at that, whether a lot more players coming into the hobby come in with this expectation, like, I want to be like that guy, I want to be like I want to be like Conan, I want to be like MacGyver, I want to be like Rambo. And I am totally dating myself here, but you know what I mean. You get the idea. They want to be like what they have seen. And we've all read books, but that can, and I prefer that kind of imagination, but I like to sit there and go to a movie and watch the big explosions and kaboom and the whole 9 yards, and that's fun. So I'm wondering if that kind of fuels a little bit more of this character poisoning, when people kind of go into whatever game really wanting to be that cool, that badass. And let's see, what else was I going to talk about that was really oh, there you go, mechanics in games. And I am not picking on any games at all, but I think I'm in this mode where I'm sort of like a hammer, so I'm seeing nails where they may not exist. But I'm watching Jason talk about 13th, if I can say that word, 13th Age today, which I have not read the game, so it's not a critique about the game or whatever, but he's talking about some of the mechanics that are inherent to that game. And there's a mechanic as you're doing character creation where you decide there's like one unique thing about your character. And so depending on what you decide this one unique thing is, like I think Jason used the example of I was the only human guard ever for the Elven Queen. Well, this kind of, the mechanic itself sort of encourages you to engage in a little bit of a preloading and character poisoning. And I don't think necessarily intentionally, and I could be misstating it, but I've seen these mechanics in other games where it really encourages you to have this really detailed backstory. Or some things are really special about you. Some things, some ties you have with other people, some kind of motivating event or some kind of turning event in your life, and without taking some time as a player to put some parameters around that or some boundaries around that before you go ahead and start spinning some of these tales, I think it can kind of encourage you by accident. And once again, I'm not really picking on 13th Age. I haven't read the game. But I've seen other games that have mechanics sort of like this, or character creation elements like this, where it may, unintentionally encourage players to engage in something that could end up being character poisoning. Whether they're just making themselves more important, by just imagination, or whether they're making themselves, they're setting themselves up to be upset because they can't back up the stories that they've already told about their character and what they used to do and what they've done in the past. So, so I'm not sure, sounding like an older curmudgeon, I saw a lot of it back in the day, but not as nearly as much as I see now. So that's kind of my my take on the character poisoning thing. It's not cool, and I'm not saying you're wrong or a bad person for doing it. I'm saying it ruins fun. It makes the player upset when they're not able to live up to these things. It can upset the players around them when they feel like the person's sort of like setting themselves up to be at a higher station than them. It can set up the entire game group up for disappointment or a lack of fun, as the player who's imagined themselves to be far above the actual mechanical capabilities of the character, and they just find themselves not fitting into the game world, not fitting into the actual setting or group of characters, or a lot of times just not fitting into their own skin, which is no fun. So yeah, this is kind of a long, rambly video about character poisoning. I'm sure RuneSlinger's video and blog will be much more cogent, but this is something I've run into like over and over again, and it just I understand it, but I don't understand it because this in one case, and I'm not saying I'm all that in a bag of chips. I'm really not, not even close. I have humility, but it's just something that I've never found to be really natural to engage in. And why? It's I've read the book, and I don't want to declare things that I've done before I've done them.